I'm super excited to have you on today.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. It's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Very cool. Well, I'm really interested in digging into your background for so many reasons. You have sales leadership experience, so you're sort of coming in at the ground floor, building around you, which is a really interesting perspective. You also have experience in the services side, which is something that maybe a lot of our listeners, at least myself, I don't have as much experience in. So interested to get your take on how things differ from, say, pure SaaS.
Yeah,
And also, I saw a little bit about your background, how you were a little apprehensive about getting into sales. Maybe you had a
yeah.
preconceived notion. I'm totally the same way. I had the same sort of viewpoint before getting into it. So, want to unpack all of that. But for listeners, maybe that don't know you or need a little bit of an introduction, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your career, and how you got into this world of founding selling.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my name's Chris. I live on the West Coast. I'm initially Memphis born and raised, and then relocated out to San Diego almost 10 years ago now, which is saying that out loud is hard to believe. Like time is just moving so quick. But yeah, so live out here now, my wife and our son. And yeah, in my background, I've kind of like you mentioned, I got into startup life and really just kind of this whole sales life. Because when I kept coming out of college, I had a couple of friends who joined, like I call startup land, early in their 20s. And I think just seeing them, and I remember like years ago, I happened to kind of drop by the office one of my buddies was working at just to give him something. I was like, man, this environment is really cool. And I was just drawn right away to the ability to like work on things that are new and that are innovative. There's just part of it was just kind of the environment around that I thought was just so attractive. There's kind of this buzz, there's this, energy around excitement around, hey, we want to build something that we really think matters and is going to do something cool. So I was always drawn to that. And then so that's kind of what led me into saying, hey, I really want to go do this. And I think also the second thing that I was always attracted to is that at that stage, it's hard work, but everything is about the work. It's about, okay, how do we take this business that we all collectively believe in and want to see successful, and how do we make it happen? And so you kind of strip away, it's really about, the noise kind of fades, and it's like, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and let's figure out how to accomplish this. And so I think those are just some of the things that drew me in right away to, man, I really want to be a part of this kind of world. And so that's how I got here. And then, sales it's been kind of this journey of, being individual contributor, to kind of climbing up into more leadership oriented roles. And as you mentioned, the thing about that I like about leadership in a startup context is, like you mentioned, it's a little bit of multiple hat wearing. You get to build and kind of test and iterate in terms of process and systems, and then kind of roll in the team on side of that, and then have the people leadership and trying to empower and equip people to reach their full potential. So I think I've loved being able to, again, it's not easy. I definitely don't want to make it sound like it's not a challenge, but I think it's a really fun and rewarding challenge.
Yeah, a lot of your journey resonates with me. A lot of the reasons why I joined the startup world was for the same things, this sort of mission to build something new, kind of make your dent, right, in a way in the
Yeah.
world and
Yeah.
change the way things are done, make them maybe more efficient. Is what drew me to it, and just the startup culture. The people that you meet at startups and the passion that they have for what
Hmm.
they're building. Right, it's more than just a job in a way. It really is a mission. But I
Totally.
also had a similar viewpoint, I think that you did on sales, right? Like, you know, I wanted to join a startup. I wasn't a technical person. I didn't code. So it
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
sales, marketing. That was kind of the area that I was looking. And I was apprehensive about sales because of, the stories of snake oil salesmen and, that sort of vibe that I didn't feel like was something that matched my personality. But as
Totally.
I've gotten deeper into sales, that's changed. I'm curious to hear your perspective. What was your viewpoint when you first started thinking about sales, and where did it shift where you started to realize actually that this was something that was a good fit for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm glad that we kind of share that. I always like connecting with people who like kind of had that similar origin story. I'm like, we're linked, so that's cool. But yeah, I think it really it kind of falls under that umbrella of startup. Like I kind of started with this environment that I wanted to be in, the startup world, and then I think through that lens, my whole paradigm shifted. Because like you, I had this like Wolf of Wall Street,
Yeah.
view of it. But I think I realized that you know you can have the most innovative and, world changing product or service on the market, but until you can actually sell and monetize it, at that point, it's just hype and it's just potential. And so I think that realizing that is when it really clicked for me. It's that, oh, like, sales is it's this necessary thing. It's this reality that this is what it takes to kind of bring this thing that we believe in to the market and allow it to go live into the world, and actually make an impact. And so it was more of just a perspective shift of seeing that. And I think also what really helped me is, I don't know if you can relate to this, but I was really fortunate early on to see a lot of different types of personalities and
Yep.
styles be effective. And so I think for me, that kind of clicked where it's like, oh, not only is this paradigm shifting, but on top of that, I'm seeing a lane where I can still be me, and bring what makes me unique to the table and still be effective. I don't have to become something I'm not, or, compromise who I am. I can still be me and be effective. And so I think those two things kind of in tandem are what really changed things for me. And that's kind of what, brought me to this point.
Yeah, a totally similar experience in the sense that when I joined a startup actually as a sales and marketing intern. That was my first
Mm,
role.
mm.
This was back in, oh man, 2009, right? So
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
going back in the days. But what was interesting is I was working with two salespeople, and they were so different in
Mm,
their
mm.
approach. One was much more your personality, relationship sort of driven salesperson, and then the other was very process oriented. And I kind of like
Mm, mm.
pulled bits from each of them that you know turned out to be my sales personality. But I think that
Yeah.
what that opened my eyes to, and it sounds like you as well, is that there's many different layers to sales. That Wolf of Wall Street snake oil sales person is sort of a very shallow view of what sales
Yeah.
is, and there's so many different layers to this function. And as you said, it's so necessary to get these meaningful innovations to market. So
Totally.
totally connect with you on that as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about the services side
Yeah.
as well. So my world is SaaS, right? I've always sold
Mm, mm.
software. um, it looks like you have a little bit of background in both. What do you see as sort of the main difference in how you approach sales as somebody that now is selling primarily services? It seems like, how is that different than selling software, pure SaaS?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it I mean, you're right. There fundamentally there's differences. And I think for me it's been a learning curve, kind of having a little bit of exposure in both worlds. But I think, it all comes down to, you always think about, your buyer, because every buyer is different, every market's different. You think, okay, what are the things that, they're caring about? What are the things that make them hesitant about a solution like mine? You want to kind of start to understand how they think, where they're coming from. And then I like to also put myself in those shoes and think like a buyer. Like if it was me on the other end of this, like what would I, care about, prioritize, have hesitation over? And I think that one of the fundamental differences that I've learned is that they just land differently. Like if it's a product, I think the way you approach that's different. It's like, okay, well, yeah, I'll try this. I'll go for this, and if it doesn't work, then maybe it doesn't work, and we'll kind of pivot. But I think when it comes to a service, especially one like the space I'm in, where it's so deeply connected to the fabric of the business, and it's so like intimately woven into the day to day like operations and just functionality of the organization, I think that it's a different you approach that from a whole different viewpoint, because I think that sometimes the stakes can be higher. I think sometimes the risks or just the things that are going to be involved in making that decision and then utilizing that on a day-to-day basis, it's just a much deeper connection to your company. So I think you just have to come into it with a whole different mindset of, okay, I probably want to be a little bit more cautious on the front end. I need to kind of have probably more people are going to be involved in making the decision potentially. It's just going to be a lot more of an involved decision about not only do we go with this, but also how we kind of manage it day to day and utilize day to day. So I think for me, that's been the biggest thing is so when you understand that from the buyer's perspective, the way they're thinking about it is different, then it helps me understand, okay, I have to, maybe change my approach. I have to come into it knowing that, maybe what worked here, in more product roles may not quite be as effective, and I have to adapt and evolve. And so that has been the biggest learning curve, is just how the mindset of a buyer can be fundamentally different in both spaces.
Yeah, it makes sense. And just to clarify, you're selling IT services right now, right? And security services. Is that sort of the focus?
Correct. Yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Awesome. And so one thing that I think about when I was looking at the company, I'm thinking about, okay, how does Chris sell? What are the differences? In my world, all like the sales process kind of circles around the demo, right? It's like
Mm,
you've got
mm-hmm.
obviously you got discovery in the front end that you're using to sort of uh, craft the perfect demo, and then you've got this demo that you show the product and how it solves further specific use cases, right? And then
Yeah.
there might be showing that demo and or like an iteration of that demo to various stakeholders depending on what they care about and so
Yeah.
on. The part that I got stuck on when I'm thinking about your world is there's no demo. Like, what do you do? How do you do that? So I'm curious, what sort of replaces the demo in your world? What is the centerpiece of what you're showing them or using to essentially get them across the finish line so that they're like, that thing or that service is what I need, and these are the partners to deliver it for me.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of layers to this. I'll kind of unpack this from two angles. That's all right. So I think, one is on the lead gen side. So kind of just starting conversations and kind of getting that off the ground. I think it comes down to which I know, we can probably agree, like this applies, I think, to anything, but I think even more so when you're adding in this, like we talked about this complex product. But I think it starts with, earning the right to engage. It's this whole thing of like, you got to be both relevant and relevancy and value, and outreach. And I think that you got to realize that people are incredibly busy. I don't know there's ever been a time when there's just more noise out there. And
Yeah.
so you have to come in there and say that, people don't owe me a conversation. I can't have that. I have to earn that right. I have to deliver something leading with value and give them a reason to even want to engage to any degree. So I think that's a big part of what we focus on. And that can take different forms, but I think a lot of it is, again, knowing some of the complexity and things like that. It's what can we point to show, real proof that this type of thing is effective for a business like theirs. And if we can kind of start to showcase that and provide with number and data and, success stories, I think that can kind of help move the needle there for sure. So that's one of the things we do in terms of just kind of more top of funnel. I think as you go forward, I think a couple of things. I think one is, in our industry, maybe more than others, I think just the face-to-face interaction and just trust building
Yeah.
is really important.
Mhm.
Because I think that's like, again, going back and putting yourself in the position of a buyer, if you're going to be working with something that is, so fundamentally woven into you want to be able to kind of, there's value and there's power in being able to meet that person and kind of have a face-to-face, conversation connection. So I think that definitely plays a role in our industry, and I'm sure others as well. But I think, beyond just that, I really think it's I guess in the vein of that, it's just being able to, show from a more technical standpoint, being able to kind of walk through and show the scope of, okay, here's kind of what this can lead to. Here are some things that we can unpack and the outcomes around it. So a lot of it comes down to, being able to unpack the full kind of scope of that from a technical standpoint and layering in that opportunity to connect in person and build a real trust. And because that can just make a huge impact on the outcome.
Yeah, I think in all sales, the relationship and trust portion is so critical. I think, in SaaS, the product, the demo is a vehicle for helping you build that trust, but there
Yep.
is
Yeah,
the human element that's always going to be there, whether you're
totally.
selling software or services, right? And maybe even more so in services,
I think more
being able
so.
to
Yeah.
being able
Yeah.
to
So
lean into that, right?
lean
Is
a little heavier.
Yeah. I wanted to pick your brain on your leadership experience, right? Your sales
Mhm.
leadership experience, and specifically hiring a team. I actually got a message the other day from a founder that I know who basically was like, "Oh, I love the AE founding AE podcast that you're doing because I'm actually thinking about hiring a founding salesperson."
Nice.
And he asked me two things. He asked me one, like, how do I know if it's the right time to
Mm,
hire?
mm,
And
mm.
then what should I look for? And so I wanted to get your take, like, as a sales leader, actually, maybe
Yeah.
putting sort of the founder aside, but the sales leader, when do you get to a point where you're like, you know what, it's time to build a team around me? Whether it be one person or two. And actually, that's another question. Do you hire one person first or do you hire multiple people? So yeah, when's the right time? How do you think about hiring? And then we can get into like what you look for afterwards, but maybe starting with that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that this probably applies to, there's probably some overlap in terms of how it applied to like an actual founder and then kind of like a sales leader. But I think it's really important to not, well, okay, let me try to, because I have so many thoughts on this, but I think I'll start with saying I think it's really important that timing is critical.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have seen over for just being in startup world for a long time is that it's easy, like if you don't hire, or if you hire without a well-defined repeatable scalable process in place, then that is where things can go wrong quickly. Because I think that like whether again it's from a founder or maybe the sales hire number one, they're coming in with a lot of expertise in the industry or just whatever, like there are a lot of ways that founder or initial sales hire can drive success in a way that might be unique to their skill set or their capability. And so I think that, for me, it's all about kind of my test is, do we have a process in place that is repeatable and scalable as we expand? Because I want to think my litmus test is, have the things that got us from 0 to 1, are they things that are unique to, this situation, this individual, this specific context? And if that's it, if we've only had success there, we're not ready yet, because we need to then say, okay, we need to do more refining and more process build out and more system build out to get it to a point where it's more plug and play, and we can bring in the team and they can run, whoever we bring in, they can run with this because it's ready for handoff. So I think that to me is kind of the ultimate litmus test of if we're there and if we're ready, because that's what you want. You want to put anyone you bring in a position to succeed, because they have what they need. It's been well defined and proven. And I think the proven part is really key too. Yeah. Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
it totally answers
Yeah.
my question, and I think you're totally right. I think what I think about is product market fit, making sure that you know
Mm,
who your ICP is. You have a sort of a proven use case that repeatably solves for that, is
yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
the bare bones. Maybe that's even a bare bones for hiring sort of the first sales lead, and then hiring a team around them. To your point, like having those things in place so that these new reps can be productive, right?
Right.
Is
Right.
really really important, because for a lot of companies they're the most expensive resource that you've invested in up to this point, right?
Totally.
And
Totally.
anytime where they're not productive, obviously there's going to be some onboarding period, but usually in startups it's kind of like learn as you do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you need to start seeing that return on investment pretty quickly, so having the systems and the process and the framework to get them to productivity is so critical. In terms
Totally.
of traits for people that you're hiring, I'm really interested in this one, both
Yeah.
from two angles. One is the usual startup traits, right? The person
Yeah.
that's the builder and that's gonna like thrive and be
Yeah.
passionate and
Yeah.
excited. That's one piece. But the other is level of seniority. And that one's really interesting because I've heard two sides of the coin. Oh, you need somebody that's junior and they're like gonna be hungry and be willing to do the work.
Yeah.
And then I've
Yeah.
heard, oh, you need somebody that's experienced, that is not just thinking about like doing the work, but building.
Totally.
And then I've heard like arguments against both sides, which is like, well, if they're too junior, they're not going to have that experience to be able to apply, and if they're too senior, they may not want to do the work. I'm curious,
Yeah.
where's the sweet spot that you think about, and what are those traits as well that you look for as you're starting to interview these early reps?
Man, I love this question, and I'm similar to you. I've heard so many different kind of takes and sides on it, and I think that, and I've seen kind of outcomes on both spectrums. I've seen, hiring someone. I think an easy trap to fall into is you want to hire for a title, or you want to hire from someone who brings name recognition, like, oh, they were at
Yeah,
this thing. But the reason it doesn't always work out is because, as we've talked about, at an early stage startup environment, when you have to be really both comfortable with that, with kind of the fact that a lot needs to be built and refined and tested. You have to have a certain level of comfort with knowing that's what you're walking into. I think you have to also have a little bit of familiarity with that, because if you only kind of existed and lived in a very like a mature system that's well defined and proven, and I mean, that obviously takes skill. I'm in no way, shape, or form like taking away from that, but that is a completely different approach than coming into something that is being built and refined. And so I think that that's where I've seen it go wrong, is because if you can't connect those things, it can just, that's where the disconnect can be. And on the flip side, I've seen if you're too junior, um, maybe you're not quite ready to, like, you're in execution mode. Like, you can grind and you can, have a really high capacity and all that, but you may not yet be just a little bit far enough along to think, okay, well, let me think more strategically about how do we build for this, or how do we test this. You might get to that point, but you might be a little bit further away from that. So I've seen it going. So for me, I look for, what is this middle ground? Like, I look for someone who has the mindset and the mentality of, I'm here to execute at a high level. I have hunger. I have high capacity, because that's what we need. We need someone who's willing to kind of roll up their sleeves, and not just someone who's like, oh, I'm just kind of, I've been managing from a distance, but no, I need to kind of be more hands on. So I look for someone that, first of all, has that. But I also look for someone who, at least has the capability to step into leadership. I think that
Yeah.
that's a big one, is if I can find that balance of, I'm talking to an individual, I'm like, I can see the hunger and the drive. This person wants it, and I believe they can do it. And then, even if maybe not tomorrow, they'd be ready to step in, like, they have the raw ingredients, that can step into a leadership role, and they can, once they've, and I think from there, I or whoever can help kind of get them from point A to point B. But I think those are the things I want first and foremost, anyone we bring on.
Makes sense. Any red flags that you look for, that you've seen where, you're like, okay, this person is not, they might be a great salesperson, right? But they're not suited for the 0 to 1 sort of phase of sales.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say the biggest red flag is, and this is what I would try to really focus on, and just kind of how we approach the conversation. It comes back to what I said before, is like comfort level. I want to think like, I want to try to get to, what is their, like, if they step into this, how comfortable are they going to be, and how okay are they going to be with uncertainty, with the fact that we need to make pivots, with the fact that we are going to fail. That's inevitable, and we're going to learn from that, and we're going to adjust. Because I think those are the things that, it can be easy to, like, think you are okay with that, at a conceptual level. But I think that that's something that, it's a hard thing to always be comfortable and okay with. And so I think that's the one thing I want to drill down to, because if that right there is already a little bit like, ooh, that's not quite what I'm looking for at this point where I'm at in my career and life, like, that's okay. Like, everyone's different. But if that thing is missing, I think it kind of ripples out and impacts a lot of other things along the way.
Yeah, totally. Makes total I think that's such a critical part, and sometimes maybe the part that people miss, right? And where there's a lot of failures in terms of hiring is, the person looks good on paper, they have a background, their experience in sales, but if they don't have that, not just willingness but eagerness to
Yeah,
build to build something, right, as they're selling, I think that's the critical missing piece. So a really, really good point. One thing, when I was looking at your LinkedIn before, when I was prepping for this, that I got
yeah.
really excited about is, you had a bunch of posts that talked about, mental health
Hmm. Hmm.
and balance, right, and family, and all
Totally.
these things that, when you read all these books about startups and sales and stuff like that, is
Mhm.
missed. I mean, it's all
Yeah,
about
yeah,
sales and the process and all these things, but when you're in the game, it plays such a big part in the experience, right?
totally.
um, what got you interested in that side, maybe beyond just experiencing it yourself?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what advice do you have? Like, what have you learned in your journey to find a balance in terms of mental health, being driven at the startup, but also being present with your family at the same time?
Man, for sure. Now, I appreciate this question, because it's something I care very much about. As you can see, I talk about it. I think, it definitely, it's kind of in this culmination. It just started with just my own personal journey in life, but I think it's so applicable to sales, because sales can be, as we both know, it can be a very high pressure, high stakes world that we live in. And so I think that, I always say, like, if I don't do these things, then that can eat me alive. So it's
Yeah.
really meant to kind of, and it's also like how you show up well for others. It's how you take care of yourself so that you can show up well for the people that matter to you. But I think for me, it starts with having outlets. Like, I'm such a big proponent of, you have to, and whatever those outlets are going to be unique to you. but you have to figure out, it comes with just like understanding yourself and what are the things that bring you joy. What are the things that allow you the space to disconnect and to unwind? And it's like, whatever those are, like be very, very intentional about making space for those things on a regular basis. Because when you're investing, that is a form of investing in yourself. Because when you're putting the time to do those things, you are then going to, in return, show up better in every arena of your life, work and personal. And I can tell you, and I'm sure you can too, like has been, if you look back at me historically, there is a correlation between like where my performance was and where my headspace was based on where I was in life, what I was dealing with, how well I was dealing with those things. And so I just think that it's the most important thing you can do. And then it also connects to my family. I think that my goal with them, my son's almost 2 now, so we still have kind of a young one at home. And I think and how that kind of plays out in that context is that to the best I possibly can, my motto is, I leave work. If I shut that switch off. Like when I'm with my son and my wife, like I don't have my phone with me, like I am fully locked in. And then, how at that age they go to bed early. So it's like, all right, well, maybe later on if I need to check an email, whatever I can, but I'm trying to put these walls up between these spaces so that one is not bleeding over into the other. And because I don't ever want to look back and be like, wow, I really was not engaged in this moment with my son the way I wanted to, because something out here was bleeding over and like holding me back. Like that's really important for me not to ever do. So that's why I try to create these boundaries in the spaces that I occupy.
Yeah, it's so impressive and important that you have discovered this so early in your son's life. So I have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I tell you right
Ah,
now, I know
love it. Love it.
yeah, 2 boys, and I can tell you, and you've heard this probably a million times, how fast it goes, right?
Ooh, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
my 8-year-old is still, he still wants to hang out with me and stuff, but you start to
Yeah.
see flashes of when he's around his friends,
Yeah. Ooh.
maybe, yeah.
Mm.
So, and I can see where it's heading in terms of just, the usual, when he gets into his teenage years, maybe he won't want to spend so much time with me and so on, right?
Man. Oh
And
yeah.
then obviously when he goes to college and then he becomes an adult, so this time that we have with him is so precious and so short. That being present, and I'm with you. I'm a founder, and there's definitely a founder culture of like always being on and so on.
Right.
I'm not
Right.
one of those founders. I'm actually like, when my kids come home from school, I'm spending time with them until they fall asleep. The
Yeah.
weekends, I'm there with them, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
I'm with you on it, and I think I think to your point, it actually makes my effectiveness at work so much better, right? When I
Totally.
can sort
Totally.
of have that outlet and have that balance in my life. So
Well,
I'm with you.
cheers to being present dads, man, and doing our best to
Yeah,
do that, to show up well. Yeah.
absolutely. And what no better place to end, I think, the conversation today. Such a rich conversation. We covered so many different aspects, from, being in the trenches to the balance with our family life and all that. If somebody's listening to this and they're like, oh man, this Chris guy is awesome. I want to chat with him more. I want to learn from him. I want to pick his brain on certain aspects of things that we covered today. Where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn is always important. As you kind of alluded to earlier, I tend to be pretty active on there. I enjoy showing up. I've met yourself included. I've just found that when you just show up, you meet really cool people that you wouldn't have otherwise met or didn't expect to meet. So I enjoy just kind of, I view it as just like a 24/7 networking event that's just always going on. And when you just kind of show up and contribute to conversations and add to it, you meet cool people. So yeah, that's always the best place to connect with me. And I love meeting people, and for all kind, from all different types of careers and parts of life.
Awesome. Well, Chris, this has been super fun. Thanks so much for taking the time today. I'm sure folks will be reaching out, and you're a great guy, and they'll be excited to chat with you. So thanks for taking the time, and have a awesome day over there in San Diego.
Of course, Justin, I appreciate you inviting me on. This was great, and I look forward to staying connected with you too. Far beyond this podcast. So,
All right. Awesome. Take care.
all right, Justin, see you.